Well, we will call this meeting to order. Good evening, everybody who is here tonight and those who are still in the process of joining us. My name is Janet Buning. I am the Vice President of Programs for Women's City Club of Greater Cincinnati, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's program, which is a very, very special program for us, a conversation with the Honorable Maureen O'Connor, Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, and recently retired. This is presented by Women's City Club of Greater Cincinnati and also with the support of three co-sponsors, Action Tank, Applied Information Resources, Inc., and the Cincinnatus Association. So tonight's program is a continuation of Women's City Club's focus on Ohio state government, which really has greater impact on our daily lives than anything that the federal government does. Back in November, we had a very lively program with author David Pepper and State Representative Adam Byrd to talk about the Ohio legislature. Tonight, we are turning our attention to Ohio's judicial branch with the best possible person to speak about that, the Honorable Maureen O'Connor, Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court from 2011 to 2022. But before I introduce our speaker, who has been the first woman in many, many roles, I first wish to introduce Jeffrey Dye, who is the first man to be president of Women's City Club, and also our tech expert who is managing tonight's Zoom program. So Jeff, say your words of welcome. Jeff, you are muted.
Yeah, we also should ask everybody else to mute while.
Yes, everybody else needs to mute, and we're working on anybody who needs to be muted.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me to unmute.
Yes.
As president of Women's City Club of Greater Cincinnati, I'm excited that we are presenting another informative program to help us understand our civic landscape. Tonight, we'll learn how our courts at the state level impact our lives and how they work. Next month, we'll have an opportunity to hear Marcia Coyle discuss the U.S. Supreme Court at our National Speaker Forum at Memorial Hall. These two programs demonstrate how the Women's City Club realizes its mission to educate, empower, and engage our citizens. Please take a look at our website to find more opportunities to be involved and also consider joining the Women's City Club as a member. So let's turn it back to Janet Buning, our VP of Programs, to introduce our speaker.
Well, a few words about housekeeping before we get to that. If you are not already muted, if Jeff has not automatically muted you, please do mute yourself for the time being so we won't have any inadvertent background noises. You may be visible on screen if you choose to be. We are not going to take any of the pictures down. That's up to you if you wish to be visible. We welcome that. It's nice to see faces instead of names to talk to. We are recording the program tonight. In case you joined late and did not know this, the program is being recorded and it will be available on our website. It is also currently being live streamed on YouTube. So the order of the program this evening is the Chief Justice is going to speak to us with some information about her career in state politics, her viewpoints on the Supreme Court, things that she wants us to know. Then we'll have some questions from Women's City Club. And after that, we will open up the meeting to questions and answers from all of you. And we are really glad to see a lot of you here tonight. We're so glad you came to join us for this. How will do your questions? If you will please post them in chat, I will check in from time to time and I will relay the questions to the Chief Justice. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker tonight, Maureen O'Connor. She began her public service career when she was elected in 1985 as the magistrate for Summit County Probate Court. She went on to serve as in Summit County as a judge for the Court of Common Pleas and then as prosecuting attorney. In 1999, she was elected with Governor Bob Taft to serve as the Ohio Lieutenant Governor and Director of the Ohio Department of Public Safety, the first woman to serve in those roles. In 2002, she ran for the Ohio Supreme Court, and in 2010, when she ran for election as Chief Justice, she carried every county in Ohio. She served as Chief Justice until her retirement in 2022, which was mandated by age limits set in the Ohio Constitution. She is the longest serving woman in state politics, and I think one of the most brilliant. During her time on the Supreme Court, she was renowned both for her leadership and her legal abilities. As Chief Justice, she earned many honors and accolades for the reforms and innovations that she brought to Ohio's court system. So we are delighted that she accepted our invitation to speak tonight about her incredible career, the impact, the authority of the Ohio Supreme Court, and some of the key issues that the court will be addressing in the coming year. So please join with me in welcoming Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor. A little clap, clap from everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Am I coming through okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, perfect.
Yes,
Well,
you
thank
sound
you
great.
very much, Janet, for inviting me, and Jeff for your job, your duties as president. There's a distinction, being the first male president of this group. So congratulations on that, and congratulations to the women who put you there. I want to, again, I'm very grateful to be able at this point to talk about my career on the Supreme Court. I am probably at this stage, I'm almost 2 full months into retirement. I left the court December 31st, midnight of 2022. So I've been retired since then. I'm more excited about things that I have on the horizon going forward that have to do with, governance of Ohio and some reforms that I want to talk about. But I'm going to touch briefly on, my career as an elected official. I like to say a public servant, because not all of my positions have been elected. I've been a public servant. Now, Janet, you said I was an elected magistrate, but magistrates aren't elected. They're appointed by the judge that runs the court. I was a magistrate in probate court. I was in private practice. I then was asked to become to apply to be a magistrate in probate court in Summit County. And I did, and I spent almost 9 years as a magistrate in that's an appointed judgeship. You're hearing cases, you're conducting trials and hearings, and etc. For those of you who may not know, probate is the court where you have guardianships, both of adults and children, incompetent adults, either due to age or physical or mental incompetencies. I also did the involuntary commitments to people for mental health issues. I had one really joyous facet of that job, and that was to conduct all of the adoptions in Summit County. So I presided over hundreds, probably thousands of adoptions. And I always say that went a long way in my election, especially in Summit County, even across the state, because there were folks from across the state, because I always had my picture taken with the babies and with the children. So I was probably on everybody's piano or mantle or something, so that was part of their family history. So anyway, that was the fun part of it, of that job. But I then became a common pleas court judge in Summit County, and I was appointed by Governor Vornovich, and then I had to stand for election. Once you're appointed, you have to run in the next general election. I did so. I got almost 70% of the vote in Summit County. That was November, and then I resigned from that judgeship in order to become the county prosecuting attorney. And the backstory there is that the gentleman who was the county prosecutor for, I don't know, maybe 3 terms, maybe more, I can't recall, was elected to the 9th District Court of Appeals. So there was a vacancy in the prosecutor's office. Having been a common pleas court judge, I knew how important the prosecuting attorney's office was, of course. And I felt that the individuals who were vying for that at the time, and it would be by appointment from the, the county central committee, would not be good candidates, to put it bluntly. They wanted it for all their own reasons, and the gentlemen that were seeking it. So, I knew I was politically viable in Summit County. So when I said, I'd like to resign from being a judge and become the county prosecutor, people thought I was nuts, but I was able to do that because, as I mentioned, I had just gotten elected with, again, almost 70% of the vote. So, the only thing I'm going to say about the job as county prosecutor is that it is probably the most important and powerful job that you can have in your county, and for a variety of reasons. Number one, there's so much good you can do with that job, but there's so much accountability that you can demand, and that, I think, is one of the most important things. I took over the job in the Child Support Enforcement Agency in Summit County, Ohio, was under the auspices of the prosecutor. There were only 6 child support enforcement agencies in the state that were under the prosecutor. All the rest were under, other agencies or other departments. When I was considering taking this job as prosecutor, the Child Support Enforcement Agency in Summit County was deemed 87th out of 88 counties in Ohio for its effectiveness. So I knew there was only one way to go, and that was up. So that didn't bother me to take the job under those circumstances at all. And quite frankly, 2 years later, we were nominated for 2 national awards, one of them being the most improved agency in the country. So, and the secret there, let me just tell you, hire the right people, put them in the job, let them do their job, and stand back. And, obviously have oversight, but let the right people do their jobs. And I always say I hire people that are smarter than me and let them do their jobs. And that's how I've been successful. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I'm not trying to be modest at all. That has been the secret to my success, is hiring smart people. And so anyway, I was county prosecutor. I was very active statewide as a county prosecutor. I was involved in the Prosecuting Attorneys Association, had high profile cases. We were involved in, government corruption in Summit County. There was a lot going on. And I came to the attention of Bob Taft and his advisors, and one thing led to another, and I ended up running with Bob Taft to be to be lieutenant governor. I was running from a safe seat, so I really didn't have anything to lose, and that's the way I was looking at it, because I wasn't exactly sure what life would be like in Columbus, but I knew that if I didn't win, I'd have this great job as county prosecutor. And I wanted to, I always thought in the back of my mind, I'll be prosecuting attorney for, maybe 3 terms, and then I would want to go back on the bench. I would like to end my career being a judge. So that's what my game plan was, but other things intervened, and I got, I became the lieutenant governor, but I also was head of the Department of Public Safety, which is one of the larger departments in the state. Had about 4,000 employees for the public safety, and that kind of catapulted me into some prominence, because during my term, 9/11 happened, and I was the Ohio's liaison with the newly created Homeland Security office. Tom Ridge, who was the former governor of Pennsylvania, and I worked with Homeland Security, and both in Ohio and nationally, and certainly in Washington. So that was an unexpected facet of the job. It was, I had really some remarkable experiences. Programs not long enough for me to get into all of them, but as lieutenant governor, I was. It was a very interesting and far-reaching, impact. But as I said, I always wanted to go back on the bench, and that's what I thought. That's how I was going to, complete my public service career. And at the end of 4 years, there was an opening on the Supreme Court. Now, I always had planned to go back to Summit County and be a common pleas court judge, but There was an opening on the Supreme Court because, again, age limits we have in our Constitution, and Justice Andy Douglas had to retire at that point. So I said, well, this might be my opportunity, rather than run for lieutenant governor again, to get back on the court. Only this time the court would be the Supreme Court. Well, I got elected. And that election, I got 86 out of 88 counties. So that was quite a exciting election as well. I was an associate justice. Tom Moyer was the chief justice at when I became a member of the court. A phenomenal leader and someone that I was very privileged to have served with, and really learned by example, from Tom. I had to stand for re-election in 2008. I was elected in 2002, 6 years later, 2008. In that election, I was elected by all 88 counties. So I knew with those good numbers that I could run in 2010 for Chief Justice, and I did. Tom had to retire again because of age limits. Unfortunately, Tom passed away on Good Friday of 2010, and that was April. And that was a really tough time on the court for the rest of the year. It was really a tough time. But I fortunately was elected in 2010 as Chief Justice. The role of Chief Justice, you're equal with the 6 other justices as far as your authority over voting on a case or asking questions or writing opinions, that sort of thing. There is no distinction between the chief and the other justices when that comes into play. However, the chief justice is the administrator, for the court, responsible by virtue of the Constitution and the rules, of superintendents, the duty for oversight and establishing rules of superintendents voted on by the court for the operation of the courts in Ohio. Now, one of the things about Ohio that is similar to other states, dissimilar from other states as well, is that we have a non-unified system of courts. In other words, each judge is individually elected, and they are elected, and their court stands on its own. It's not a unified system. There are other states that have unified systems: New York, California, Indiana, and a variety of other states have unified systems, which is a little easier maybe for budget concerns and rulemaking and that sort of thing. But Ohio, we don't have that. We have 723 judges in Ohio, as some of them were so fond of telling me, I'm an independent office holder and you're not the boss of me. Believe it or not, that was the attitude of some, but you can imagine that. But anyway, I was thrilled to become the Chief Justice, to be the first woman to hold this position, and in 200 some years of our statehood. And it allowed me to do a lot of initiatives as Chief Justice, things that I felt needed to be addressed. And if you get on the website, and it's supremecourt.ohio.gov, if you look on the website of the Supreme Court, you can go to my webpage that is there, and you can look at all the task forces and the commissions and the committees and everything that I formed to study various problems that I felt were necessary to be studied and have reports and recommendations made. There, that's on the website. And there are things like access to justice, fines, fees, and bail, bail reform, the death penalty task force to examine, how we administer the death penalty in Ohio, the conviction integrity task force. So that's just a few. There's other ones, but I'm not going to, go into those right now, because you can look that stuff up on the website. But it allowed for me to gather all interested parties, and that's kind of that was my modus operandi, is to gather all of the interested entities, bring them to the table, that let's talk about a problem. Let's outline what the parameters of the task force will be, or the commission, what we need to examine, and then to let the folks that were members of that task force to solve the problems. In other words, identify best practices, identify the problems that needed to be addressed, what's the best policy, what's the best practices, and then create a report as a result of that. And that is a duty that the Chief Justice has, to create these task forces and study groups. And I did it some in conjunction with the Ohio State Bar Association, others but again, I brought every interested, diverse interest to the table. It's just as important to hear from people who agree with you as from people who don't agree with you, so that everybody could have a healthy discussion, and everybody could feel that they were part of the process of drafting these reports. So as I said, I did that. That was the way I like to tackle some issues. So I was elected in 2010. I was reelected in 2016. In that race, I again won all 88 counties, but I didn't have an opponent, so that was pretty easy to do it at that time. That was the first time, I think, in the history of electing chiefs that there was, the chief was unopposed. So that was kind of a good feeling to just, that probably because I had won so many counties in the prior elections, they figured they weren't going to waste their time. I like to think that maybe they thought I was doing a good job and they didn't need to challenge me. But whatever the reason, I didn't have an opponent, and that allowed me, that year I didn't have to spend campaigning. It allowed you to do your job, to focus on improvements and things that you weren't going to be distracted by an election. And believe me, running for office is an extremely distracting thing to do. If any of you have done that, I know some of you recognizing the names you have, but I was also during, after the 2016 election, I belong to this national organization. It's the National Center for State Courts and the Conference of Chief Justices. And I was elected to be an officer in the Conference of Chief Justices and rise through the ranks, and I became president of that organization. And then I was also chair of the board of the National Center for State Courts. Those are positions that run simultaneously. That allowed me to do a lot of things nationally, be involved, and internationally. I got the opportunity to travel around the world and address groups of judges, international groups of judges, Morocco a couple times, Philippines, South Africa. There were a lot of The Hague in Netherlands. So there were a lot of wonderful opportunities to meet judges from around the world and compare judicial systems. And it was great. It was great to bring back a lot of ideas, but it's also great to share a lot of what we do in the United States. Now, I noticed that you're going to have someone who's going to speak about the federal system, and that person is going to be your next, guest speaker. But I wanted to give you these statistics, I guess, that will put things into perspective. Across this country, state courts handle about 95 or 96% of the cases that are filed in this country. The federal courts, bankruptcy, federal trial courts, federal appellate courts, the United States Supreme Court handle 4 or 5%. And that puts, I think, the whole thing in perspective, how extremely important state courts are, how many lives are impacted by the judges of our trial courts, our appellate courts, and the state Supreme Courts in this country. Not to say that what happens in the federal courts are not important, because it absolutely, but by volume, you're looking at, the type of cases that affect, families. I mentioned I was in probate court. Those are, estates, guardianships, adoptions, mental health hearings, etc. You have then your domestic relations court, which affects both, the family when they're breaking up due to divorce. Juvenile court has authority over, people who have children out of wedlock, and they have to, make allocations of responsibility there. And of course, children who are there by virtue of delinquency. There's just the impact that state courts have on our lives in this state and across this country is probably maybe underappreciated, because the headlines are always made by the United States Supreme Court or this federal court doing that or whatever. And I don't know that everybody always appreciates that we have these, systems. We have the federal system and we have the state system of courts. That is not even always appreciated in Washington. I was in Washington with one of the executives from the National Center for State Courts, and he was talking to an aide in the United States Senator's office, and he was explaining that he worked for the National Center for State Courts, and this person, again, working in the United States Senator's office, said, "You mean there's two types of courts in this country?" So where has our education system been? We really need to, focus on educating, kids. A much more concentrated effort on educating about not just our court system, but government in general. And that's my, that's one of my pet peeves, is that we need to do that. One of the things that I was very proud of at the Supreme Court is our outreach to students. We have thousands of kids that come in there every year to tour the court. We have a wonderful education center. If any of you have been to the Supreme Court, our education system is one of the, probably, I'm going to say the top 3 in the country. I'd say top 1, but I'm going to give, be modest here and say that there's, but if you have the opportunity to go to Columbus and tour the building, if you have not done that, it's really a treat. It's one of the most magnificent public buildings in the country. And just don't take my word for it. When we dedicated it in 2004, Chief Justice Rehnquist came in to do the dedication, and he told me that. And he had been in, probably every courthouse, at least state courthouse in the country, as well as all the federal courts. And he was magnificently impressed with our buildings. So if you haven't been there, it's a short drive up from Cincinnati. You could go there, tour the building. You can arrange for a tour and go to lunch and go on back to Cincinnati, because it really is worthwhile, absolutely worthwhile doing. It's magnificent. So I have done, a lot of different activities as Chief Justice and as an Associate Justice. I've served with 23 different justices since I've been on the court. I'm the last of the Moyer Court. Nobody that is currently on the bench, the Supreme Court of Ohio had the opportunity, I say privilege, to have served with Tom Moyer and been part of that court. And it was a very collegial court. It was just, I fell in love with it as soon as I got the job. It was just absolutely. Now, I've got to give a shout out, though, to all of the folks that work at the Supreme Court. I would not be as successful as I have been fortunate enough to be had I not picked the right people to be in the right jobs There's about 250, sometimes more, employees at the Supreme Court. And that goes from, the facilities and maintenance people all the way up to the administrative director and to my chamber staff. I had 4 clerks at any given time, plus an executive assistant. Again, they always made me look good. Hire smarter people and let them do their job. And that has really worked out extremely well. Now, the Supreme Court has been in the news quite a bit over the last, 2022, because of redistricting, and I can answer any, questions you might have about redistricting, because that is probably the topic of the moment when it comes to what we're going to do, what we're going to face over the next 2 years. There's several things that are gonna be laid right at the feet of the Supreme Court of Ohio. Redistricting will be one of them, because there will be a new map that has to be created in 2023 for use in 2024. Keep in mind that 2024 is a presidential year, so there'll be an early primary, which means that the map has to be done in 2023. We still have the same redistricting commission that we had last year, the makeup, and that may or may not pose a problem. We have a different makeup on the court, different political. When I say political registration, I don't believe that politics should enter into how you do your job as a judge. I've often said over and over again, if you let politics in to how you do your job as a judge, you shouldn't be wearing a black robe. It's just there is not room for politics on the bench. Unfortunately, this last election in 2022 saw what I thought was an intensifying feature of politics in the judiciary, because for the first time, for the Supreme Court and the appellate jurisdictions, we have 12 appellate jurisdictions, judges that were running, people who were running for those positions had either an R or a D next to their name on the ballot. And that was done intentionally by our legislature in an attempt to obviously get as many Republican registered judges on the bench, which is kind of insulting, I think, to judges, to think that I'm going to support you to be a judge because you're registered Republican, so I know you're going to vote a certain way. And that's what that says. And that, I think, is, it's insulting. It's insulting to any member of the bench, any lawyer that is running to be a member of the bench, to be, I guess, thought to be predictable. In other words, you're not going to have independence. You're not going to live up to your oath of office. You're going to allow your politics to decide how you do your job. How unacceptable it would be if someone said, well, I'm going to allow my religion to decide how I'm going to do my job, or I'm going to allow my, any of the other, maybe the group I belong to, or the, you just can't do that. You have to leave that all at the door when you come into the courtroom and put on a black robe. But that's not the way some of our elected officials believe that judges should conduct themselves. And I'll just tell you, before we get to your questions, because we're already, looks like 36 minutes into this. When I voted on, we had 7 maps altogether that were rejected by the majority of the court repeatedly for being unconstitutional. And I have a stack of letters, and by far the larger stack is individuals writing saying, thank you for what you've done. Thank you for not letting politics enter in, and thanks for, doing your job. And then I got, a smaller stack of letters, and the quote was, I voted for you because you are a Republican and you're not voting like a Republican. And Yeah, and I said, well, that's really, thank you for the compliment, because I think that's nice to hear that. Well, it's not nice to think that that's how you think judges do their job, but it's I've never thought that that's how you do your job, and I think the majority of the judges in this state don't do their job that way. And that's I will stick up for the integrity of our judiciary. So that is kind of my career in a nutshell. Now, okay, I'm moving on, having been retired, as I said, for almost 2 full months now. Well, actually, we're at the end of a month, so 2 months, and I plan on addressing redistricting reform, and I'm working with a group, several folks right now there, but I'm not alone. There are groups across the state and across this country that are very much interested in redistricting reform in Ohio. There's been plenty of recent examples across the country of success in redistricting. So I want to see a ballot initiative for constitutional amendment in 2024, November of 2024. And that's what the goal is. And again, it's a work in progress. The amendment hasn't been drafted, and I'm right now what I consider on a listening tour, where I want to go around and talk to people who are interested and listen to what they have to say about it, what their thoughts are. League of Women Voters, various civic groups, and just anybody who wants to tell me, what their ideas are. We had a lot of voter participation, citizen participation coming out when, in 2022, when those maps were being drawn. Yes. And that has not stifled. There's still people that this is, the top of their priority list. So, that's something that I really want to be involved with. There may very well be an amendment to be voted on an amendment to be voted on for, I guess there's talk of having a 60% passage rate in order for a constitutional amendment to take place. And now, obviously, it's 50% plus one, one extra vote. And that's all it takes. And it's been that way for 111 years. And now all of a sudden, because there's some issues that are going to be redistricting reform is going to have to take a constitutional amendment. Reproductive rights is going to have a constitutional amendment. And there's several other, constitutional amendments that are being bandied about, whether they make it to the ballot or not. But now all of a sudden, the Republicans from the Secretary of State through the legislature think, we ought to go to a 60%. It's very transparent. Let's put it that way. So I guess maybe do we have some questions?
I have a couple follow-up questions I want to ask you really quick.
Okay.
What you just alluded to, the whole redistricting effort, when the committee was told repeatedly what they had to do and did not do it. Taking that a step further, all the way back in 1997, Ohio's school funding system was declared unconstitutional by a 4-3 majority, and nothing has changed. One of the big questions that this group put forward when we talked about this program is basically, how do they get by with that? How does this disconnect? How is that? Even someone the other night at a board meeting said, is the current legislature even legal because they were elected from illegal boundary districts? So how is it that they're allowed to continue to do what they do when the court says no?
Well, the Rolfe case is what you're talking about for the school funding. And that case, went through several iterations, and that was decided before I got to the court.
Right, 1997, yeah.
Well, but then I was elected in 2000. No, excuse me, in 2002, there were still cases going on. Durolf had more than one case. There were several, as I said, cases with regard to it. But all right, the case was over with. The court, before I joined it, had made their decision 4-3. And what they basically said, this is a problem that the legislature has to deal with. They have to solve it. This is something, this is a legislative act. And then the case was over with. And there hasn't been another case brought to the Supreme Court with regard to Durolf or the school funding. And, courts don't, what they call sua sponte, bring cases up. Something has to be filed before the court can consider it. And we haven't had, a follow-up filing. Now, when you say, though, that several things have happened since 2003, for one thing, the governor and with the legislature in the budget in the capital budget devoted millions upon millions of dollars to improving the infrastructure of schools, building new schools. This was Governor Taft. This was something that was separate and apart from school funding. It had to do with the capital budget, not the functioning budget. And that was done. And that really was, a positive, especially through kind of the southeastern districts of and the inner city school districts. So there was a lot of improvement in the physical structure of our schools. And there has been legislation, I'm going to say within the last 2 years, with regards to additional school funding. It hasn't, cured the problem, so to speak, but it's on the road, or, there has been some initiatives passed through the legislature with regards to that. So it's not that nothing has been done incrementally, both with the capital and the administrative, budget for our court system. Is it enough? Our school system. Is it enough? No, it probably isn't, but that's something, again, it's in the lap of the legislature in order to do this. And we can't, as a court, say, without a case coming to the court,
right.
You need to do something about this. There has to be a filing, and the court has to take that in. So that's why that hasn't happened. And when you look at, for example, the redistricting, the court 7 times said, "Hey, you've got 7 maps here, and they're unconstitutional." Well, the proponents, and I believe it was the Right to Life folks and some others, went to the federal court and filed an action in the federal court to control the redistricting, the map drawing. And there was a 3-judge panel, and there is a procedure in the federal court that allowed for this. And the presiding and administrative judge of the federal Sixth Circuit appointed 3 judges on this panel, and 2 out of the 3 said in April of 22, if you don't come up with a constitutional map by May 31st, I think the very end of May, then you're going to have to use the 3rd map. Okay, so even though if we know it's unconstitutional, it's been ruled unconstitutional, but you're still going to have to use the 3rd map. And that came from the federal court. I was highly critical about that at the time. I still am. I don't think that they had the authority to do that, and it made no sense. I mean, imagine you've got 2 parties that are diametrically opposed. They're in the court system. The court system says you legislature the redistricting commission have to come up with a constitutional map. And if you don't, you're going to have to use the third map that you drew. Well, that's giving them exactly what they want. Where was their incentive to draw a new map? Well, they did a fourth map and they did a fifth map, and the fifth map was a reiteration of the third map, and it was nonsense. But they knew they didn't have to do anything that we said that they had to do, because they had a federal declaration that if they didn't do it by the end of May, that they were going to be able to use the third map. And then, of course, that was challenged, and they decided, when I say they went to the United States Supreme Court, the state of Ohio, based on the last map. The Attorney General has taken it to the United States Supreme Court, and we'll see what the United States Supreme Court does. But in the meantime, in November of 22, we used unconstitutional maps, not only for the General Assembly, but also for our congressional elections.
Wow.
And so, all right, now you make the observation that these were unconstitutional maps. Yeah, but they were doing it under the authority of a federal court. So it's never been done before in Ohio. So I can't tell you, is it constitutional? Is it valid? Is it, you know what, it is. And it just is what it is. And there'll be a new map drawn in 23 to be used in March of 24, because that's when the primary will be, because it's a presidential year. We'll see what happens, see what they come up with.
And that sounds kind of depressing to hear that answer, because we as citizens, I think speaking for many of us on this call, we do feel kind of helpless, like a case is taken to the court, a decision is rendered, and they can simply choose to do nothing. Is there any way, any recourse, does some new law need to be made? What can we do to make the legislature have to act? How would one go about, I mean, obviously taking them to federal court didn't work so well. So is there any recourse to make them act?
Yeah, taking it to federal court, I don't think it had any business being in federal court.
Right, and it didn't work.
All right, here's the solution. We passed reform so we don't have gerrymandered districts, so that we have more competitive districts, both for the Senate and the House and Congress. And that's what this redistricting reform study, or groups are all about that right now, and that will be on in 2024. And what we need to do, there's a lot of dimensions to it, but one of the most imperative is to get politicians off of the redistricting commission. We have right now, the redistricting commission is made up of the governor, the secretary of state, the auditor, and then two individuals who are appointed by the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. They appointed themselves. So there were 5 Republicans and there were 2 Democrats, and the Democrats were the minority leaders of both the House and the Senate. In order to have a 10-year map, you have to have a bipartisan map. In other words, 4 of the 7 members have to pass a map, and those 4 have to be 2 R's and 2 D's. Okay, well, that wasn't going to happen. So they only were able to pass then a limited map under normal circumstances. But the federal court said, you're going to use this in 2022, and then you're going to draw a new one in 23 for use in 24. Again, that's not provided for any place, but that's what the federal court said that they were going to do. So in 24, we need to have a constitutional amendment, an amendment to the Ohio Constitution that will reconstitute the commission. There are other states in this country who have nonpartisan redistricting commissions, and Michigan, Arizona, Iowa, California, there's a whole slew of them, and I'm just, so we wouldn't be alone in Ohio if we had an independent, nonpartisan. My suggestion is that we have a bigger redistricting commission. It's made up of citizens, not politicians. that we figure out a way to select them. We look at what other states are doing. We look at what Michigan, et cetera, have been doing, how they select them. We get people that are qualified, that have, the ability to sit on, and yeah, maybe you'd have, and this is just off the top of my head, I'm not saying this is how it exactly would be, but maybe 5 Republican registered voters, 5 Democratic registered voters, and maybe 7 independent voters. They don't belong to either party. And that then we'd have to figure out how they would be selected, what it would take to pass a map, that sort of stuff. That's all, can be studied, and we can beg, borrow, and steal what works in other states.
And that does sound encouraging. Yeah, that sounds encouraging. Some of this kind of circles back to a question that was put in chat quite a while ago, was, would you ever consider running for governor and have some of the authority to make some of these changes?
Well, actually, the sad part right now is that the legislature has what's called a supermajority.
Yes, they do.
And the governor can propose things, and if the legislature doesn't like it, they can just pass a law that's going to say, no, governor, that's not going to be that way. Or if the legislature passes a law and the governor vetoes it with their supermajority, they can say, sorry, governor, we're going to override your veto. So it really makes a supermajority makes our legislature, it's a concept that it's just so foreign to think that there can be a super majority and be utilized in this way. It really calls into question whether we do have checks and balances when we have the concept of a super majority that can override the governor. And I know we've had it and a lot of other states have the veto, the ability to override a veto. I get that. But, it's also these legislators then could pass laws that would invalidate court decisions. Now, that happens a lot, it certainly does. But I don't like the fact that you have too many eggs in one basket when you've got a super legislature that can override the veto of a governor, and also override an opinion for the Supreme Court. I don't know that I call that very healthy for
no, it's not.
Checks and balances type of government. That's what our country is founded on. The 3 branches of government, and there's supposed to be checks and balances on each other. And if we don't have that, I think we're deluding ourselves.
Well, in one of the questions in chat, one of our members, Susan Noonan, was asking the group of judges who were just elected with those R's and D's after their name, do we really think they're going to leave politics at the door? Has that really even further eroded the checks and balances? And I don't know that there's any answer to that. That's mostly a statement of Susan's I wanted to share. I don't expect you to have an answer to that question.
Well, the men and women who ran for the Supreme Court and for the appellate courts, they didn't have any say in that.
No, they did not.
They have to. That's the way the ballots are drawn, and that's where they're so the R and the D is there. They don't have any choice about. They won their primary, and so they're on as an R or a D in the November. Now, early on, when I was Chief Justice, I took office in January 2011, probably 2012 or 13. I came up with a plan on how to improve judicial elections in the state of Ohio, to take politics out of judicial elections. And one of the things I wanted to do was move all judicial elections to the odd years, so that we wouldn't be overshadowed by congressional and Senate races and statewide races and presidential races. So all the judges would be elected in the odd years, and we would be able then to be some of the most important races that were on the ballot, and people would take notice of judge races. I also, wanted a whole program on how to educate the people about judges, and we came up with judicialvotescount.org, which is a great a website. It's now being run by the Ohio State Bar Association, which you can learn about any candidate, that's running for judge. So next year when you're voting, or this year, it'll be municipal elections. You can get on to judicialvotescount.org at the Ohio State Bar Association website and learn about. You could have done that for the last probably 5 years. Because we had it housed at the Supreme Court, but now it's housed at the Ohio State Bar Association. So here's the other thing that I thought was going to be the way we could take politics out of the judiciary, and that would be have open primaries, so that you didn't run as a D or an R. It was the two top vote getters would face off in November. It could be 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 of each, independents. I don't know. Whatever the 2 top voter getters in the primary would then face off in November, and that would minimize the influence, theoretically minimize the influence of political parties in judicial races. And I think that now all of these things would have taken, some of them would have taken a constitutional amendment, others would have taken, just statutes passed by the legislature. There was absolutely no interest in the legislature for any of my ideas.
Surprise, yeah.
I'm
Surprise,
shocked.
surprise, yeah.
I'm absolutely shocked.
Yeah, and that is frustrating. Well, one of the gentlemen on this call, Jeff Wise, and I'm sorry, Jeff, I don't know you, but Jeff is very generously saying he wants to provide technical guidance to those who are crafting the rules for an independent redistricting commission to address Ohio's unique situation. And he's asking, how can he get involved? So he wants to do technical guidance to help craft the rules. Is there a way for Jeff to get involved?
Well, yeah, we're going, right now there's tons of different groups that are involved. The League of Women Voters, there's people that have been thinking about this ever since the 2018, when the constitutional amendment was passed, and especially in 2015 and 2018. One was for the legislature, state, and the other one was for Congress. Everybody had high hopes that it was going to work, that we would have an independent, redistricting commission, and we'd have maps that got rid of gerrymandering, and and that didn't happen. Okay, so now believe me, shortly, when I say shortly, we're in February. I'm going to say that probably by early summer, there's going to be some announcements, and there's going to be some, discussion about which way we want to go with this. And there's a lot of, as I said, a lot of groups that are talking about it within their own groups and then reaching out across. And there's a lot of people that are very much interested and have been interested in drawing maps, not only in Ohio, but across the country. There was the opportunity to present maps to the redistricting commission, so that anybody could do that, and we had people from across the country submitting maps, and that's one way that you can get involved in redistricting. As far as wording of the constitutional amendments, there's folks that have done this, for other states, and they're out there offering their services. I found this to be interesting. I didn't know this before I started working on this. The university, Princeton University has a gerrymandering site. It's a study group. Professor Sam Wang is he's a neuroscientist. And they are very much engaged in redistricting across the country. Oh. And so we're working with that professor As I said, there's tons of people that are very much interested in this. Just by way of example, Michigan passed a redistricting, a new way of, redistricting, a new commission, etc. And it started out as a grassroots effort. And their slogan was "People, not politicians," I think is what and they had no money to begin with. It was grassroots. They weren't, it wasn't, I don't mean this as an insult, but it wasn't a politically sophisticated group, but that was the beauty of it. I think the people who were politically sophisticated that opposed it underestimated the workers, the grassroots efforts in Michigan, and they were able to prevail. And once they were challenged in court, once they made it through the Michigan Supreme Court and they won their Supreme Court case, then a lot of national funding groups stepped up and started to fund the effort. And so I was just talking to some folks the other day. I said, well, if Michigan was able to do this with a group of grassroots, volunteers, they collected signatures through volunteers. They didn't hire signature gatherers like you normally do. They did this on their own. I'm just in awe of what they did in Michigan. But if they were able to be successful, and here in Ohio, we have a lot more awareness, for one thing, just because we were just through, the year 2022, and everybody, understands, what redistricting, what the challenges are of redistricting, and what the downside for gerrymandering is. It's not just enough to say we have to have fair districts and we have to have competitive districts and we have to have, the ratios, correct. You have to understand why it's a bad thing not to have that. And the reason it's a bad thing is that then you have the few that are ruling the many. And you don't have that competitiveness. Government works best when it's competitive. When they look at, you have different views brought to the table. And what's the first thing you think about? What do we have in common? And where are our differences? And how can we resolve those differences? We're not, nobody's going to get 100% of what they want, but nobody's going to lose 100% of what they want. Right. There's going to be compromise. That's how you run, that's how you run things. That's how you run things in hopefully your families, your personal lives, why not government? Why have, that affects more people than any other entity? Why not government look to do the best they can for all citizens and not just the few, the majority, the folks that can afford to have their views put front and center.
That would be awesome. And you actually read the mind of one of our questioners who brought up about Barbara Fillon as asking about the Michigan plan. Could we use Michigan's work as the basis for our work? It sounds like it could inspire us, but that we have to kind of move ahead and do our own work on that.
Well, yeah, we can't, we can't, there's differences, obviously, in Michigan right. and Ohio, and the numbers, but, if you remember, if you were paying attention to any of the opinions that were drafted during the redistricting, one of the things we said, and we couldn't order them. That's one thing about this, the constitutional amendments we have that is so frustrating. In other states, when there would be, a roadblock, the butting of heads and the maps were unconstitutional, in other states, New York, Indiana, you name it, the Supreme Court could then hire map makers and they would draw the maps. Our constitutional amendments that were passed in 15 and 18 specifically say that the Ohio Supreme Court shall not draw the maps. So we were precluded. If we could have been the ones that hired map makers and say, have a bipartisan set of map makers and do it in public, not behind closed doors, we wouldn't be in this position. but we have that roadblock that says the Supreme Court could not have done that. So anyway, that's the
Yeah, it's so
shortcoming.
frustrating. And I think that the people on this group, you will find a lot of support for your constitutional amendment effort from Women City Club, League of Women Voters, and many people on this call. But we do need to move into some other issues. I don't know if we've completely answered Alice's question about are there any repercussions or consequences for the redistricting commission for not following the court orders. And it would appear there are none because nothing's happened to them and they're still empowered.
Yeah, then here's the other thing. At some point during the process, the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House dropped off of the redistricting and appointed other members of the House and the Senate to it. So they weren't even on it any longer.
It just goes on.
Yeah, it just
goes on.
It's an extremely flawed amendment. But I'll tell you, everybody was on board. There was all the newspapers were on board when it was being passed. Academia, the political parties, everybody was thinking that this was going to be the answer. And I think that there are a lot of people that pushed it that knew it wasn't going to be the answer. And they pulled a fast one. That's all I got to say.
Well, looking ahead to some other things, I know you've been retired for a whole 2 months now, but you probably have a pretty good sense of what might be coming up to the Supreme Court in the next year or so. What are the major cases that you see on the horizon that you think will come before the Supreme Court that will have impact on the state of Ohio?
Well, I'm not sure. Well, I think that we'll probably have some case that's related to reproductive rights.
Right.
That will be, I think that's, a guarantee. Then, there's kind of, I look and see what the legislature has, just last week or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, they introduced, that legislation to say that federal gun, federal gun laws cannot be enforced in Ohio. That we can. House
Bill 51, yes.
Yeah, and it is, man, that's pretty bonkers. That is really, one of the things that I looked up more about it. And the legislative services, they put together an analysis of what the statute says, et cetera. But, the argument is that the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution specifies that the United States Constitution and federal laws generally take precedent over state laws. That's just what it says in the United States Constitution, okay? And provisions of the bill that nullify federal laws, acts, executive orders, etc., prohibit the enforcement of those federal matters within Ohio and eliminate any immunity that might exist under federal law and may be vulnerable to challenge under the Supremacy Clause. Well, this same concept was introduced in Kansas, and it was discussed in a case called the United States versus Cox. And in that case, Shane Cox and this other character, Kettler, were prosecuted under the National Firearms Act for selling and purchasing unregistered firearms and unregistered silencers. Okay, their defense, their argument was that the Kansas had this statute that, shield them from being prosecuted under federal law. And the court that heard it did not agree. The court stated that although, quote, Cox and Kettler have been prosecuted for conduct that, based on a state statute's assurances, they believed was lawful, allowing state legislatures to stop the federal government from prosecuting its laws would upset the balance of power between state and federal government and contravene the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. So the court did not address the constitutionality of the Kansas law. They didn't have to. They said it violated, let's look at the United States Constitution. And So anyway, Kansas has already kind of, decided this in the federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court declined to review the case. In other words, these guys lost in the lower court, and they decided they were going to take it to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to take this case. So whatever the appellate court decided is the law, and the appellate court said, you're violating the supremacy clause. So you got that precedent. And I can't imagine a federal court in Ohio deviating from that kind of precedent. But I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just telling you.
You think it's going to put, apparently Representative Mike Loychik, I guess, is the one who's behind it, and he doesn't agree with that decision. So looks like he's going to try to move it forward. So
Well,
this
yeah,
in our Supreme Court?
That hasn't gotten out of committee.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's brand new. I
Right.
don't know which way it's going to go, but there's, I think Jean Schmidt is also supporting this.
Ah,
I think she's from down around
she is. She's from the Claremont County area.
Claremont. Yeah.
Yeah, she's from
Yeah.
just a little east of the downtown Cincinnati. So
Right.
other issues that you think might show up on the Ohio Supreme Court is for reproductive rights is pretty much a given. The gun law, if they get it together, will probably end up there. Are there other kind of red flag cases coming up that you think of?
Well, I can't think of any that, that are more important than what
Right.
the two I mentioned. I think that, I really think that as long as we have a legislature that is a supermajority legislature, you're going to see a lot of what they pass, you're going to see give rise to litigation. I can't predict what they're going to pass. If this is an example of what they think is a good idea, or what some of them think is a good idea, that's unfortunate. But yes, I think that if this passes, you're going to see that, but that's going to be in the federal courts. That's not going to be in our state system. That'll be in the federal system. But who knows what's on the horizon as far as what they want to think of. It's you've kind of, I feel, some people blame where we are today on term limits. That we have term limits both in the House and the Senate. And it was not this way when people looked at service in the legislature as a career. In other words, they were in it for the long haul. And they knew that their colleagues, whether they be the same party or the opposite party, were in it, they were in it for the long haul. So they knew that they had to get along. In other words, they had to be mindful, respectful. They had to, they had to govern. I guess that's the only way I can say it. They had to govern. And then we had term limits, and everybody thought, oh, term limits is a great idea because then we're going to not have, these folks that stay in the legislature forever. But I don't see the benefit having, come to the forefront here of term limits. I really have, because what do you have? You have folks that are in the House, they do their 8 years in the House, then they run for the Senate, they do their 8 years in the Senate, then they go back to the House. And there's people that are just flip-flopping back and forth, by agreement. And, that's not what people intended.
No.
And I
No.
think a lot is to be said for institutional knowledge, institutional memory. And if you have somebody that's only going to be there for a short period of time, and then they're looking to move on, either they're going to want to be a statewide office holder, or they want to go back to their county and become a county chair or a county commissioner or a member of county council, or, there's that revolving door concept. So I don't believe that having term limits is a good thing. I truly don't.
I'm kind of in agreement. I don't know about there anybody else here, and here maybe there'll be some thoughts in chat, but I agree with you that you barely get to know what you're doing, and then you don't get to do it anymore, and you don't get to build your power base. And I say this as a person who's been a trustee of our neighborhood council for 47 years, and I'm not going anywhere. So I can still, it's the things that you know and you know how to do. Jean Nightingale, one of our members, has suggested that perhaps we need civics lessons for the legislatures, just like we have the education programs in the Capitol, that we need a civics program for the legislature. I would not disagree with that either. So folks out there, I mean, I have a couple more questions from Women's City Club, but if any of you want to say something, and we seem to be a very polite group, if you want to unmute and ask a question, I think we could let you do that. Is there anybody like to ask a question directly? Going once, going twice. I can't see if anybody's unmuted.
Harriet Kaufman.
Harriet.
Hi, I want to know if there's a way you see of revising the flawed legislation about gerrymandering. Is there any way to address the holes in that?
Yes. It's the redistricting reform that I spoke about, that we should repeal the amendments that are now part of our Constitution and put forth new amendments for the voters of Ohio to vote on, that they can accept as amendments to the Ohio Constitution.
So that's a multi-year.
Well, we're hoping to get it on in 24.
For repealing and to vote?
Oh yeah, it's one fell swoop.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, well, I've been part of the Greater Cincinnati Voter Coalition. That's a nonpartisan group of nonprofit groups in Cincinnati to support voting participation, education, getting people to polls and so on. So this is a huge, important issue locally, and a number of nonprofits are participating as individuals and as groups. So we are staunchly in favor of what you're talking about, because gerrymandering is a huge issue.
Yes, it is. And, and it's not, I don't want to give the impression that this is strictly a Republican problem, because right now the Republicans are in, they'll hold the offices, statewide. But there have been, previous years when the Democrats had controlled the legislature, and, same thing happened. And quite frankly, it just happened in New York, where they had democratically gerrymandered district maps, and the Democratic leaning, or when I say Democratic registered, Supreme Court overturned it, and they said, no, this is wrong, and what you've done is unconstitutional. What they did, though, is fix it. They got constitutional maps that passed muster in New York. The same thing, Indiana had the problem, and their Supreme Court was able to, hire the map drawers and get that handled. And so too, so many other states. But again, we have that prohibition in our Constitution amendment that says Supreme Court shall not do that. And so there is no neutral body that is interested right now in drawing these maps.
Well, and I hope as that process unfolds, that there'll be ways that you'll stay in touch with us as Women's City Club. We are definitely a group of activists. We've been around since 2015, before women had the vote, and we like to sign up and go out and do things. So I think you have a good group of supporters here who want to see those amendments get put in place. And if there's things you can communicate with us, that would be terrific. Oh, Jeff, correct me, I said the wrong date, not 2015, 1915. Sorry, Jeff, my brain doesn't do numbers. I'm an English major.
Right.
Sarah Gideons had a question that she sent me last night about Moore versus Harper, and I didn't quite understand the question. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and would you please ask Chief Justice O'Connor the question about Moore versus Harper, because I really didn't catch on to what.
Well, I just want you're familiar with it already, aren't you, Judge O'Connor?
Oh, yeah, I am. It's,
it's the one where the independent state legislature, state legislator theory is coming up, and it could overturn checks and balances in each state by saying that the Supreme Court doesn't have authority over, I guess it was really for drawing districts or declaring districts as unconstitutional.
right.
And I'm just wondering what your prognosis is on that.
Well, I've stopped trying to, handicap the Supreme Court on which way they're going to go, because I've talked to a lot of different people. I never thought that Dobbs was going to go the way it went. And so, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I've talked to some people that say that they think the Supreme Court is just going to punt on this, that they're just going to, come up with some kind of, ruling that's going to just leave it out in limbo. Then there's others that say, no, there's no way that they can upset the apple cart when it comes to checks and balances. So, how could they possibly support the legislative, position on this? And again, I can't handicap it, but just think about this, that the legislature is saying, in the Supreme Court, that we have the ultimate authority to draw these district maps, and they are not subject to review by any other branch of government. Not the governor, not that the governor would have that, overview, but ever since Marbury versus Madison, when it was established that there was judicial review over acts of the legislature, and that was obviously, the federal Congress, that was Marbury versus Madison, but we had a case. We had a case in Ohio, the McFadden case, which was basically the same principle. Our case was, I think, 1806. It said the same thing, that the legislature, that the acts of the legislature can be reviewed for, the lawfulness of their acts by the courts. And that's basically, what happened. That was an interesting case. There were 3 justices on the court at the time. One of them, they wanted to impeach them. I guess maybe that's where those guys in the legislature got the idea that they didn't like a vote of a justice, they just impeach him. But anyway, they tried to impeach the 3 justices because back then in 1806 that they had the 3 justices. Of course, the justices rode the circuit back then as well. So anyway, the McFadden case, they said that they were going to impeach these 3. One of them had retired from the court. The other one left the court, but in the meantime, he got elected governor. So it was like, yeah, you're going to impeach me? Well, guess what? I'm the governor now. You're not going to impeach anybody. And then the third guy, they didn't impeach. It failed. So that wasn't. It wasn't very successful to set aside judicial review. Judicial review has been, the one of the tenets of our government, and that's why we have 3 branches of government, separate but equal. Everybody has a role to play. It works. So why do you want to put your thumb on the scale and say, nope, we're not going to let the judicial branch, do what we intend, what our founding fathers, wanted the judicial branch to do. It's frustrating.
It is frustrating. Is there anybody else who has a question that you didn't get to ask? Because we really do want to give you a chance. Jean Nightingale, unmute yourself and ask it.
Yes, I have just a question about the opioid addiction in Ohio. I know this is something that concerns you. And how do you see this resolving itself?
Oh, how long we've been fighting drugs in this country. It's every time you turn around, there's a new, more deadlier drug that is on the market, and fentanyl is one of the most deadly. And now fentanyl, permeates all kinds of drugs. They're saying now you can't buy marijuana that doesn't have fentanyl in it. Heroin. There's no such thing as pure heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl laced. Why fentanyl? Because it's so highly addictive, and it's we were making great progress prior to the pandemic. That we had an all-time high in 2017 of drug overdoses and deaths, and then it kept going down and down and down because of drug courts and treatment, and that, and then 2020 happens and everybody's got to isolate, and that means that people aren't coming in for their drug treatment because the providers aren't open, and it just skyrocketed again. 2021, the deaths and overdoses surpassed that of our all-time high 2017, and it remains high. So it's almost like you start back with square one, except that the drugs now, 2.5 years later, are even deadlier. I don't know. There's funding treatment courts. One of the things that we need to do is put more money towards treatment beds for people who are suffering from substance abuse disorder. At some point, there's all kinds of different theories being floated out there. For example, harm reduction theory. In other words, you set up places where people can go and use their drugs safely, so that if they do overdose, there's people there that can give them Narcan or whatever, and they're not being arrested when they go and use drugs at these locations. I don't know that I think that's the solution, because I think that is just putting off the problem. Not everybody's going to go to a safe site to use drugs. If I had the answer to that, I would have, I certainly would have been proposing it, but it's incremental and it's a lot of different moving parts. But when this country, we have gone from just say no and hardcore criminalizing the use of drugs, to now shifting to realize that it's a disease. Alcoholism is a disease. You're addicted to alcohol. Your body can't handle alcohol. We recognize that over, how many years did it take to get there? A drug addiction, substance abuse, disorder is also a disease. It's a deadly disease. And I'm not saying that we have to be tolerant of drug use, but I don't see us as, until we can continuously treat it as a health issue. Now, I'm not saying people who are dealers and absolutely, those people should be held liable, criminally liable. But someone who's a user, and I'm not so sure that, I know jail's not the answer. Jail is definitely not the answer.
Do the pharmaceuticals bear any blame at all, you think? Pharmaceutical industry?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's why you have all these, cases that have resulted in massive settlements. Do I think that they've been, fined or settlement enough? No, I don't. I think that there should have been, but that wasn't up to me. These were settlements. They were done in federal courts. They weren't done in, the state courts.
Oh, well, unless there's some other questions, anybody else have a question? Amy, are you raising your hand or unmute?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, Justice O'Connor. This may be either too personal or too suck up a question, but most justices, when they retire, exit public life altogether. Justice Pfeiffer is one of the only ones I know who's still active. How much when you're envisioning your next role, how actively do you think you're going to be part of public office? And it's clear that you had an intellectual and philosophical commitment to redistricting from the activity of the court. How much of your continued dedication to this is because of the public a program that some political parties laid at your feet while you were pursuing the causes you believed were democratic?
Well, I am very much and continue to will be involved with this redistricting reform. I told everybody, ramping up to my retirement, that I was going to take 4 months off and do nothing. I was just going to take, the Italian phrase is il dolce far niente, which is the sweetness of doing nothing. And I thought that's what I was going to do for 4 months. And then I'll see, what's going on with redistricting and, but I have not done what I promised myself I was going to do, because right away I kept getting, phone calls and, things to go talk, events to talk with people. So I'm going to continue along this redistricting reform path. But I don't know that I envision myself doing, beyond 2024, doing this kind of stuff. I just, well, the way I look at it, I've only got so much of a shelf life as far as what my, my reputation and my career can take me. And I'll concentrate all that in the next 23-24 cycle. And then I'll probably be yesterday's news and nobody's going to want to hear from me anyway. So I'll concentrate it all on this redistricting.
Oh, I beg to differ with that. I don't think anybody's going to forget you that quickly. But to kind of end on a happier note, can you tell us, we'll ask you the sad question first. Did you leave your office, obviously wishing you could have stayed in it longer, but did you leave with any big regret, oh, I wish I could have gotten that done? Was there any big major disappointment or regret that you would like to have addressed?
The thing that is on the table that I think is just so important, and it's not gotten the support that it should get from current Supreme Court, is data collection. There's not a business in this country that can operate without collecting data to know how successful they are, how they're spending their dollars, where you get your bang for the buck, all that kind of stuff. All decisions in business are made that way. But government doesn't necessarily operate that way. And our court system doesn't operate that way. And, the legislature passes laws and they, fund the court, programs for the courts and everything. But what we need is data to make sure that what the courts are doing and the programs that are being funded, et cetera, are the most effective way to do things. And so I'd like to have data collection. The Ohio Sentencing Commission, this is their leaders in this. They have contracted with the University of Cincinnati and devising, a program that's going to allow courts to first start reporting sentencing data. And it'll be anonymous. It's not going to be linked to one judge or one defendant. It's anonymous, and we just have data then on how the courts are sentencing, like similarly situated people. And we need to know that. We also need to know, farther down the line, how about recidivism rates? If we have these programs, are they working? And the way you tell whether a program is working in the criminal justice system is, has the individual stopped committing crimes? Have they recidivated or not? And if they haven't, then chances are that program is effective. And we can't have the attitude that we're just going to lock them up and throw away the key, because we're wasting resources to do that. If we do that, there's other ways of addressing criminal behavior, and we have to do it in a way that we get the biggest bang for the buck. And that's what data is going to be able to tell us. And I'll tell you, the legislature's in favor of this. They funded this study with, the Sentencing Commission and their contract with the University of Cincinnati, because, when you think about it, they have a responsibility to know what works and what doesn't work, because they're the ones that pass the budget. And, they want this information. So I'm grateful that the legislature is in tune to this and understands the importance of it, and funding it, this data collection project. The one branch that it gets pushback from is the judiciary. There's a lot of judges that are very much in favor of it, but there's some that are pushing back against it. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that come to fruition.
That sounds like a disappointment that could become a great achievement, which leads to the happy question. When you look back on your from 2011 to 2022, what are some of the things you're proudest of? What are the stories you're going to tell your grandchildren when they're old enough? This is what Grandma did when she was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. What are the happy stories?
They're pretty much in tune to it now. The youngest is going to be 5, and the oldest is soon to be 11. But they understand that I have an important job. I just had a portrait dedication at the court in December, and my grandchildren were all there for it. I have 8 of them, and I have 6 of them, and they were involved in it, and they were pretty impressed, most definitely impressed with it. But that's another thing. If you come down to the court, you can see my beautiful portrait. I have to say, the artist, it's in the Grand Concourse right when you walk in there, and it's a fabulous piece of art. But
I thought there wasn't there a big story that they weren't going to let it be in the Grand Concourse. Did it get put back?
It was originally put there. We'll see how long it stays.
Okay.
I'm hoping
Okay.
it stays. I'm hoping it stays for the duration.
It should.
Yeah, I can't imagine that anybody would move it. But anyway,
thinking about accomplishments, though, what are 1 or 2 of the things that you are really proud of, that you're really grateful that you got done and happy about?
Bail reform, I think, is an important step, that we realize that we ruin people's lives by setting a high cash dollar amount when they don't need a high cash dollar amount, so they stay in jail and wait for their case to be resolved, and they lose their jobs, they lose where they're living, they might lose their any support system that they have, family, friends, whatever. It's just we just and it's a waste of our taxpayer money. So bail reform, I think, is an important step forward. One of the things that we did was I got together 8 states from surrounding Ohio and further on out, and put together the Regional Judicial Opioid Initiative, where the states started sharing information about the opioid epidemic, and sharing information from pharmacies, and so they could, before a pharmacist would fill an order for an opioid, they have to check on this list in Ohio to see whether or not this person has been doctor shopping. Shopping, is going around and trying to get, drug prescriptions from a variety of doctors. That is a crime, first of all, to do doctor shopping. And the amount of people that were arrested for doctor shopping, I don't know, I think there was like a 70% reduction once we started, this, and then, over that crossed over state lines. So everybody, you can see whether somebody is down in Cincinnati and they want to go over to Kentucky to doctor shop, or vice versa. So it's that was a very successful initiative. Educating judges about the opioid initiative, crisis. And well, here's another thing that I am very, very proud of is that, and this stood us in good stead when COVID hit. About, I'm trying to think how many years ago, 7 maybe. I started giving away money to the local courts for technology. And I took it from my budget, Supreme Court. We would have some money left over at the end of the year. And rather than give it back to the general revenue fund, and again, I'm talking, several $1 million a year. Sometimes it was more, but that really wouldn't mean anything to give it back to the general revenue fund, but it means so much if you grant that money to local courts. Some courts only needed $5,000, some needed $100,000. But anyway, over the years since I started this program, we've beefed up the technology in courts because that's what this grant was for, technology. And when COVID hit, we distributed even more dollars so that we could have remote hearings, so that we could have Zoom licenses, so we could have hardware and software and get I'll give you, for example, the Supreme Court, we didn't miss a single oral argument that from March of 2020 till September, I think, of 2021 is when we went back to hearing cases in person. All that was Zoom cases or Zoom appearances, and we didn't lose a single case or miss a single case or whatever. We kept our docket going, and other courts were able to do that. Over that period of time, I think I gave away close to $40 million to the local courts.
Wow.
From the Supreme Court budget. This is money that, again, we had left over. Again, sometimes it was 2.5 million a year. Sometimes it was 5 million. It just, it really helped the locals. And they were
That is amazing. That is a good thing.
Yeah.
I hope that you do get your 4 months of pure, just rest and relaxation, as the Italians say. Maybe go to Italy and enjoy it there. But I also hope that we have not seen the last of you in the public sector. I hope that many of the people on this call tonight will sign up to help with the redistricting amendment, because that does seem to be the key to end many, many woes. And Women's City Club does thank you so much for your time this evening. We would like to give you a membership in Women's City Club if you would choose to accept that. And we also would like to send you 2 of our books that we have published over the last couple of years. Okay. One is a cookbook which has a lot of our history in it. The other is a history book about our club. So if you and I can connect by email, we'll get the mailing address to send these things to. But we are very, very grateful for your time tonight. I know that life is busy for you and you have a lot going on, and we do appreciate your time tonight. So I know everyone joins me in thanking you. It's the bad part about Zoom is you're not hearing us all clap at once, but
thank you.
But we are clapping. You just can see us, but you can't hear us. Yes, let's all make ourselves visible. Harriet's clapping. Yes, indeed. And I do need to end with a real quick commercial on behalf of Women's City Club. On our National Speaker Forum, which is coming up on Thursday, March 28th at Memorial Hall, we do have Marcia Coyle, who has been the Supreme Court analyst for PBS NewsHour, and she has written for Law Review and a lot of publications. She will be talking to us about current issues and upcoming issues facing the Supreme Court. And as we've learned tonight, things that don't get resolved at the state level go to the Supreme Court. So it's important for us to follow this continuum and keep educating ourselves with our own civic duty. So that's at Memorial Hall. You can get the tickets on Memorial Hall's website, which is memorialhallotr.com. It's $50.
March 23rd.
March 23rd.
20. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a typo. Yes, Beth will kill me. Thursday, March 23rd. You know what? I know that, and I typed my notes, and I made a typo. And I'm an editor. Thank you. That's a blissful mistake to make. March 23rd at Memorial Hall. Tickets are $50 if you just want to come. If you want to be a corporate or an individual sponsor, go to our website and find out ways that you can support Women's City Club by being an individual or corporate sponsor for this event. This is our, I'm not even going to say what number. We've been doing National Speaker Program for a long time. Do any of you know the number offhand? What is this year? Is Beth still with us? Beth had to go eat dinner probably. Well,
Hey.
we've been doing this a long time and we are wonderful. So we hope you will join us for those events. Our April program, we don't have a date yet. We hope to be looking at some other important issues in our local community, landslides and other problems we've had. We have a thing called the Hillside Trust because Cincinnati is a city on many hills. So this is an important thing for us. So we invite anybody to check out our website and come join us for the Hillside Trust presentation in April. And in May, we'll look at education. With that, unless Jeff, do you have any final thing you wish to say?
Else except thank you for a wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for staying long for a really,
Yes.
a lot of questions and answers.
Well, there's a lot to say tonight, and I do appreciate everyone who came tonight too. And I cannot thank you enough, Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you all.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
good night, everybody. And I will send you an email about your,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't want to do that out
Good
loud.
night. Thank you so much.
Good night.